Most entrepreneurs don't like instilling a lot of accountability. The entrepreneur likes to be creative and they're the idea person and they're the visionary, but they don't want to be holding people accountable. When you bring in people who are talented from bigger organizations, they bring that to your company. So they bring accountability. You can kind of get away without a lot of accountability when you're a little bit smaller, but as you start getting, over, 15, 20 people, you got to have that built into your company or it's going to just start falling apart.
This concept of 60 to 90 days and, helping with cash flow and other things, it seems brilliant to have a 60 to 90 day sprint for the financial statements, just like we have in software development and other things. That's really cool. But before we jump into all of this, at a high level, what led up to you starting your own business? I think about your really large family you grew up in and then college having a business and scientist. And then, so go through that. What was that like?
Yeah, well, it was okay. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. Okay, we had a donut shop, delivering newspapers, so we were always working. And then after college, which I wasn't a great student at the beginning, but I love science. I ended up getting a degree in microbiology. I was a hazardous waste scientist, working kind of for the government. And everybody in there, I get in there, I'm a young guy, and all the older guys are like, "Man, what are you doing here? Get out and come back here to retire. Don't start so young." Typical kind of government mentality. I was there for a couple of years. And everybody was great, but it was, it's a government job. So there is a mentality. It's definitely that stereotype is true. And they're doing good work, they're keeping the ground clean, but there's other baggage around that. So anyways, my little brother starts a business, never went to college, is driving a sports car and is making all kinds of money. And thought I did the right thing. And I'm driving a beat up Toyota truck stick shift to LA an hour and a half every day. So I was like, wait a minute, something's not right here. And, he's selling stuff online. So this is right after the dot-com bust and he's doing really well. And that's it. I just decided, hey, I'm going to figure something out. I didn't know what category I was going to go into, but I saw on Yahoo search back in the day that portable air conditioner was like the number 3 search term. So like the, third highest demand, right? Probably a hot summer day or something like that when I ran across it. And I had no idea, but I just looked at where I could buy these things and there we go. So 6 months later, actually within 6 months, we were able to, I was able to quit the job and just went full time with the business.
That's incredible. And then backing up just a little bit. So hazardous waste engineer working for the government, was it identification, remediation? What was the work that you did?
Mostly remediation, or it was remediation. So basically I would work with the geologists to we were on the government side and we'd work kind of with the private scientists to kind of like look at various dangerous sites. So I actually worked on I'm sure you remember the movie Aaron Brockovich. Okay. And yeah, it was a really good movie, really. And it was about chrome 6 contamination with Pacific Gas and Electric. And I actually worked on one of the PG&E, a different site, but it was the exact same thing. I worked on one that was in Topak, California, which is like right on the river, right between California, Nevada. And so that would be an example of one of the sites. But in LA, there's a lot of groundwater pollution. And you had people don't know this, but you have dry cleaners, okay, and sadly, some of these operators were literally just dumping the chemicals into the ground in the back of the dry cleaner, okay. So and these VOCs would go into the ground and pollute the groundwater, and it's pretty hard to honestly, like nearly impossible to remediate at that point. But anyways, that was the business.
Yeah. When I was building my aerospace company, we ended up with probably the largest captive electroplating shop in Arizona, and hexavalent chrome was one of the processes that we had. And there was one building when we moved where there was a leak. Some got in the ground. We checked everything as I was selling the building. And we came up with a really innovative process using this gas into the ground to convert it to trivalent chrome. And it worked, so we didn't have to rip the building down and dig up all the dirt. So there's so many cool things that can be done there. I'm sure you were probably in the middle of all that.
Yeah. No, I saw a lot of that, and I think that's why look, I'm a capitalist, but there is a need for regulation. That's a whole different discussion. It's just how it's done, but yeah, it was really interesting to see that side of the world. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's necessary for, or required for necessary regulations, but not unnecessary regulations, so that is a whole other conversation,
Yeah.
and a lot of them probably aren't. But I think one of the biggest challenges on the planet is pollution, it's the environment.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can't ruin something for 200 years for the benefit you get of a couple of years. Like, it's just a, people had common sense about it. But some of these things, I think a lot of this is stuff that happened 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and it's still being dealt with now. Um, I don't know. I didn't get into the problem solving on the politics side. I was just on the science side with the geologists, and those were some of the sites we had.
Yeah, that's great. Alright, so you've started the business
Mhm.
out of your garage, didn't take any capital, and I understand you moved 7 times before you sold the company, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, because it turned into a distribution business basically, right? We created a great brand, a national brand, and as we kept growing, we kept having to scale warehouses, and because of our products, if you can imagine, compact appliances are not small, right? So there's a lot of logistics involved, and 3PLs aren't great with our type of product. Okay, they would be great if you have a little tiny thing, you were selling the camera. If you're selling something, like a mouse or whatever. So we're selling, you know, little mini fridges and stuff, right? And some of our products would be, 100 pounds on the lighter end, maybe 20 pounds, and then with, various dimensions. So we had to run our own warehouse, and we were very good at running a warehouse. Like, those are, you have different cornerstones of the business that makes you successful. And we were really good on the ops side. And so yeah, as we would grow, I mean, we went from a garage to, 1,600 square feet to 4,000 to 10 to 15 to 20 to 30 to 80 to 115 to 215. So and we probably had a warehouse or two in between that too. But yeah, that was. Let's put it this way: I moved a lot, and I can't stand moving, but you have to do it for the business.
Yeah, I remember moving, over 23 years 9 times with the aerospace company, it was all for
There you
growth.
go.
The first building, it was 1,000 square feet, it was cavernous, it's like, "What am I gonna do?" I bought a little belt sander and put it against the wall, now put a bandsaw in, and then, wow, go down the road, I ended up when I sold it, we were in about 300,000 total square feet,
Oh wow.
manufacturing, processing it, it was too small.
Well, we have a lot in common. I mean, your moves are probably harder than mine. I mean, if you're doing manufacturing, I'm moving product and racking and software systems. I can imagine if you have, more CapEx in there, it's those are difficult moves.
Yeah, it was a crazy capital intensive business. Yeah, the last move, we built a 200,000 square foot building where as we're moving in, it's like, oh my gosh, we missed it significantly. So we had to lease additional buildings in and
Oh
around
gosh.
the airport, put in a bunch of mezzanine.
Yeah.
And interestingly, today, as of this recording, it's been exactly 10 years since I sold it in 2016. And I walked through the building. I stayed 17 months to make sure the transition went well, but I walked through the building about a week ago,
Mhm.
introducing a friend of mine to some of the leaders down there, and they kept it going. I mean, it's so amazing. It's still a global brand, and a larger company bought them, but a
Wow.
lot of times they mess it up. When it so proud of that and making sure it went well. So I was curious, what's happened with New Air since you left?
Well, since I left, so there were some challenges with the company, kind of after COVID. Okay, with a lot of consumer products. Of all the industries, consumer products really has been hit kind of disproportionately hard because of tariffs, some demand drop. Okay, because you had like kind of a COVID push, especially for um, some consumables that have a longer life, like our appliances, right? So you had a lot of forward buying, and then a little bit of pain that these companies have now felt the last couple of years, along with some direct from China competition, and they're able to skirt the tariffs. So that makes it very difficult because some of the games they play. So you've got a little some forces, so the company has had it's still, we got great leadership, and looking for a great year this year, but couple headwinds, but onward, and the company continues. So that's
Yeah.
great.
Well, it hasn't been that long, right? What year did you sell?
Sold in 21. Yeah, so we'll be coming up on 5 years.
Okay. Are you still
Coming.
involved in any way on the board or?
Yeah, I'm on the board. Yeah, I'm on the board, and I was just in there a little bit because we had kind of a leadership transition, so I kind of stepped in for a bit to help out, but not honestly not that not that involved. Boards not on a small company. It's not a very active position.
Okay. And I
Yeah.
think it was, I listened to a number of podcasts. I think it was a Chris Voss show where you were talking about, um, at some point where you said, "Hey, I really need to get A players in here and pay for the top talent to come in."
Mm.
If I remember right, it was somewhere around, 15 years to figure that out, and then once you did that, things really started to change. So one of the things I run into, and I do coaching, I have
Mm.
mastermind groups that I lead. I feel like you and I are doing the same work in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
that's funny.
Um, but it's a challenge for people to be willing to pay for it. They see it as expense control, not investment. And the
Hmm.
most expensive thing they can do, in my view, is try to try to hire somebody that the top talent's in the $200,000 range, but they want it for $62,000. So talk
Hmm.
about what you discovered there and what changed after you did that.
Yeah, okay, that was, wow, yeah, thanks for, bringing that up because that was really actually a seminal moment really for the company, I think. I think we had gotten till about 30 million or so by that point, but and we had really good people, okay? We always had great people and always had by the way, our culture was always fun. We had, the softball teams, basketball teams, co-ed softball and company events, and we a very, I don't want to say like family, but very close. Okay, so we're always doing fun things. But one of the things is that you only know what you know, and I think that's the biggest. I think everybody should think about that. You only know what you know, so it depends where your background is. Okay, if you only know what you know, and you're trying to get up here, how do you know that 8% EBITDA margins are the right target, or how do you know you shouldn't be at 15? How do you know that you should be running accounting a certain way or operations, or how do you know how you should be negotiating on the sales side with your partners? Can you just know what you know and what books? We talked about all these books out there. But when you bring somebody in who has been there, done that, and proven they've been there, done that, then you get that. And I think if you work with a really good recruiter, because one of the problems with hiring is like if you're hiring a technical important role, I mean, I think it's like a 50% hit rate of if that person's around 3 years from then. Okay, something. I mean, I'm making this number up, but it feels like it's about a 50% if it's the right, like if it's a person that's going to take you to the next level. But if you bring in a great recruiter and you're willing to pay market, I think you can get that to 75, 80%, like where you're really going to get that right person. And if you think about all your, it, and I think what small companies don't realize, it's like, first of all, we should look at who succeeds. Okay. I mean, like, look at investors, like retail investors always get taken advantage of by like the hedge funds and the big investors, but they never think that. Okay. We're always like, selling at the low and, making the wrong moves. Right. And we're literally getting suckered by the hedge funds. So you have to realize this. Now let's go to business. What do the big players do? What have we even, it's been well publicized. They're always chasing the best talent. Okay. They set their strategy, but it's a war over talent, right? That's what Silicon Valley has been, okay, the last 20 years. But how come small businesses never think like that? We always think that we have to, pinch pennies and so you know what I mean? So it's a mindset and it's if anybody grew up in LA, it's the Clippers or the Lakers, the Clippers paid or the Lakers paid back in the day, and the Clippers were the Clippers, okay? And they were, an embarrassment until, 10 years ago or whatever. So, and what was it all about? Talent. But business owners never think that way, okay? So, I played all the sports and it's if you got the best players, you're going to have a big advantage. So anyways, I'm sure I'm just stating the obvious here, but that I finally, had that awakening. And as we added in these leaders, you get somebody who's a great leader in sales. Well, the business started direct to consumer. Then I changed into like a multi-channel, so we would distribute to different customers. Now, when I brought in the top leaders, all of a sudden now my business is selling into Home Depot, selling into Lowe's, selling into Best Buy. So that was transformational, right? That's a whole new, sales channel with massive growth potential, and that wouldn't have happened if I would have been continuing to do the sales. I had to bring somebody in with that experience who could, and then also they brought more accountability on the finance side. Finally we have great CFO. So all of a sudden we have way better bank facilities, way better bank lending. We had audited financials. We had, great at ABL with lower rates. And a lot of folks don't think about that. They're borrowing at high rates. They have terrible financials. They go to sell. All of a sudden, you got to do a quality of earnings or something like that. And it's like, the buyer is going to be chipping away at your price when they find all these problems. Or you can go in with audited financials and, the sale is going to be super smooth. And that's just two positions. But those are some of the things that happen. Now, it took me, 4 or 5 years to add all these A players, train them, do the right thing, and I'm learning from them too. And definitely the business, it went from 30 to 80, and we became more profitable. I mean, before the sale, we had very strong EBITDA percentage wise. So that was kind of the mindset shift that I had.
Yeah. And when you say it sounds really obvious, it just isn't for the vast majority of SMEs. It's just not. And
Mm-hmm.
and getting them to think that way, even if they're slightly growing and hey, we've got more profit, the comments that come to me will be, well, we can't afford that and we have to do something else. Yes, you can. You can't afford not to. I
Yeah.
think in a lot of ways. And as you're building the team, when I look at I've had 3 exits so far, 1 7, 1 8 figure, one not well into 9 figures, which is great. But as I was building that larger one over 23 years, I changed out the senior leadership team significantly 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn about building your team and how did it change over the 20 plus years for you?
Yeah, we had continually to change it, but as the company would sort of pivot, because like I said, we had different stages, right? And some of the stages at the beginning were very entrepreneurial. I think what I learned is there's there are certain things that are easier to hire for, and other things that are harder. Okay, things that are easier to hire for. Most entrepreneurs um, don't like instilling a lot of accountability. This is just my experience, okay? What I mean by that is the entrepreneur likes to be creative and they're the idea person and they're the visionary, but they don't want to be holding people accountable because that is, you have to make some tough decisions and you have to let some people go. But hold people accountable in a good way, meaning these are the goals. And if the goals are continually not met, you have to work with that individual, but, you know, eventually the goals need to be met, right? Especially if they're mutually agreed on. And when you bring in, I think when you bring in people who are talented from bigger organizations, they bring that to your company. So they bring accountability. And I think as companies grow, you can kind of get away without a lot of accountability when you're a little bit smaller. But as you start getting, over, 15, 20 people, you got to have that built into your company or it's going to just start falling apart. People won't respect the leadership and the goals, and so you can hire for that accountability. And so that's where you would, to your question, we get some turnover is as you hire people who have that, and you look at some of the other teams and they're not growing that way. You're like, wow, I want this same type of leadership on this team, and I want it on that team. And then so you would start making those changes. And then also where I did find it harder to hire would be on creative execution. It would be one of the hardest in my opinion, which would be more the marketing branding, uh, more the value proposition to the customer. I think is actually pretty. At least I had a harder time finding. I could hire for someone in sales, okay, but somebody to actually understand, they're going to take your product and you've got to position your product next to all of your competitors and why the consumer should pay for your product and how do you bring that magic out? What method is that? Is that going to be using influencer marketing? Is it going to be some sort of branding campaign or a specific marketing campaign? What that was difficult, so what I learned is like I had to stay engaged on that part because that was something I found really fun, and and it was hard for me to kind of find that right fit. But yeah, so there's various reasons where kind of the team would turn over, but at the end we had a great team and we didn't have to do that. We just kind of ran with the team we had.
Yeah, I evolved from 80-hour weeks, sometimes years on end, and I loved it in the early years.
Hmm.
Um, no more than 15 hours with over 500 team members and no more than 15 hours a week to run the business. I'd
Oh
spend the
wow.
rest of the time developing leaders and meeting with some larger customers to work on bigger long-term contracts. But when the team is right, it's almost like you're water skiing behind them because they're going. When it's not right, you're kicking them in the morning to get them out of bed. Like, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
There and you're solving problems for them. So
Yep.
part of what you said makes me think that a lot of small, medium-sized business CEOs, they're not very good at setting outcomes like requirements for team members. This is the accountability piece. They're not good at describing it. And for
Yeah.
whatever reason, and what do they say? Oh, some CEOs can, do really good in the startup and get you here, but they can't get you there. Then you need somebody else and somebody else. I don't believe that actually. I think we should all be the CEO that our company needs, and we should go through the appropriate struggle to develop those capabilities. How did you go through that? I mean, I know what I did. I'm just like most would say you're a unicorn that you just sort of navigated all that and you were the right CEO up to a very wonderful exit. What was different for you over a lot of folks that are just buying into what they can do?
Okay. I was I made tons of mistakes. So let's put it this way: like, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I mean, because I didn't, have that skill set at the beginning, and I'm sure, if you talk to some of the early employees, I mean, there's plenty of wrong communication styles and all the. But I think so. No, I made. I think. Let's see. I kind of think that people are a little, this is probably the wrong word, but I think they're a little soft. Like, if you got to be harder and you got to push through the pain and discomfort. Okay. And I think people give up too easily, first of all. Doesn't mean if you have a bad idea, you should keep pushing it. I'm just saying, I think people give up too easily, and they're not, they don't challenge themselves and they're not creative enough. They keep, doing the same thing. And I think I was fortunate where, whether it's, you know, a small case of ADHD or whatever, where I'm just like, tried a lot of different things. And, and I think that helped me. And I read a lot, of course, and talked to a lot of good mentors. And I had a lot of good mentors and was able to kind of gain those skills. Okay. And a couple of key things I'd bring up. We, when we wanted to hire people, like, I would always create a plan if we had to do something. So I said, okay, I think I hired one really good person. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I got like 5 or 6 departments. I need a good person in every department. But how am I going to do that, right? So my plan was, and I'm sure there's other plans as well that people, but have a plan. So mine was, well, if we win best place to work, then I'm going to have a better chance at hiring those people. So instead of just trying to convince them to come work for me, I kind of talked to my HR and I said, okay, like, I don't really care, I mean, that whatever, do the regulations, but your job is to get us best place to work, whatever that takes. And so, she's surveying people. We're finding out what we need to do as a company. We already had a good culture, and we ended up winning best place to work. And those are kind of the creative ways that I would kind of go about it, right? So then your best place to work, now you got something to advertise, right? It's like, someone's coming from a big company. Why am I going to go to these small guys, uh, you know, uh, comparatively? And of course, we have to have a good package, but hey, we're best place to work. You're going to be able to, you know, own your destiny and run your department. And so that's the way I thought about it. And the other thing I learned during that period about leadership is the team, what the feedback was. Now, everybody would complain about, certain things, they want a better, um, a common one was like better, health insurance packages and stuff like that. Right. And we'd always try to work to improve those. But what they often said was, we want better communication. Okay. And honestly, like, I think what a lot of times CEOs like look down on that. You actually should never do that. Like, your team is sharing with you what they want. So you should always want to address it. Okay. Such an easy thing. They want better communication. Okay. So we started having really in-depth monthly meetings with the whole team. And every department would go up there and share what they accomplished. And we would actually start sharing some of the financials, which at the beginning, small businesses are very careful. Oh my gosh, I don't want people to know how much we're making. And we started to share more of this information. And people felt like they were a part of the business and more included in the business. And so those are all things I had to learn. I didn't start that way, but I kind of had to, learn it, figure it out.
But the key is growing with the business. And I
Yeah.
think we as CEOs, all the CEOs listening, you kind of have to grow a little bit faster than the business is growing to stay in front of it, or it becomes the single biggest limiting factor, which is what I think we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's normal. I remember an early mentor, and probably one of the best mentors I've ever had. It was mid 90s. I joined tech before it was Vistage. and he sits down, and I've heard you talk about this in other podcasts, but he sits down and he goes, "Hey, here's a list of 20 things healthy companies should do." And we're reviewing the list. I'm like, wow, I do two of those okay. I'm aware of half of the other ones. The other ones I've never even thought of. And
Mm.
spent all this time kind of shoring that stuff up and growing to stay in front or and that's where I developed early on, hey, I'm the single biggest limiting factor. I have to grow at least as fast, if not faster than the company, or we're going to stay stuck all the way through. So you don't, just because you got there doesn't mean you had to have it all the way along, right? If you did it again and something different, you would make better decisions, no question. With one
Mhm.
caveat, when you have a lot more money, your decision making, in my opinion, isn't nearly as good.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree for sure. Yeah. But what's interestingly is like I think I heard on one I think it was an earlier show where you said like you're an early investor in Facebook. Okay, so what's interesting is if you look at what's happened the last 20 years, all of these companies, the CEO has stayed all the way through. Okay, this wasn't the case 30 or 40 years ago. They would start the company, and then the investor would say, "All right, we need a professional management to come in and kick out the, back in Steve Jobs got booted and so on and so forth." Now, all of these, tech giant, all of these leaders for the most part, not every time, but they have to grow, to this point. They grow and they stay all the way through because they do have something special. They were the ones that started the company.
Yeah, in the big ones that we would all recognize, the big brands and all that, there's a lot of that going on. Microsoft has changed, a couple of
Mhm.
times. That,
Yeah.
um, but for the smaller companies, they stay stuck. And something we were talking about before we started recording, in my observation, I think Amazon has close to 100,000 books in the business category, and there's tens of thousands of books out there from people that did it. Just follow my 8-step process and you will too. And there's, probably millions of leaders that tried to follow that. It didn't work out well for them. So what's the difference? And what I'm kind of coming down to, and I was looking forward to jamming on this with you a little bit.
Mhm.
It's like how we show up as a leader consistently with leadership traits, how they experience us, how we consistently show up as we go through implementing this 8-step process or whatever it is, given all the forces that are against us. And some of the forces, you've got hidden agendas, you've got friends and family dynamics, you have lack of capability, resistance to change because people really do try to drive to recreate their familiar. So that's to me the foundation of why change is so hard for so many. But if we're consistent in how we drive this 8-point plan or whatever we have, and how we treat people. So you build this high level of trust, holding people accountable. That to me seems like the real difference. And I know I'm just asking this question to you probably for the first time, but what do you think it is? Because I love how you simplified it. You just went, hey, it's product, people, and margin, and that's where we're going to
Mhm.
focus. And simplification makes a lot of sense. But how you implement that will be different than the next 1,000 leaders that try to do it. And that's what
Mhm.
made it successful. And most of those won't be as successful. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. It's funny because I actually okay, so we can go back and forth. This is a good one. I've read so many books. Don't ask me to to recall them all because I always forget like some of the names. But I've read every book. Okay, all these business books. And at one point, I got what is the point of reading these? I'm like looking through my success, which I'm very fortunate by the way. So I look at success in a way where like I got so lucky to sell at the right time and all of these things. But it's like I don't know that any one particular book was the one that, oh, that idea made the difference. Okay, I actually did do this, just mentally did this exercise of like, what made a difference here? Like, I'm sure it has, um, but I'll tell you. Let me just tell you a couple things that aren't often in books. Okay, and I think this could kind of get at the answer. Okay, so there's a lot of things that are already in the books, right? But what's not in the books is what your profit margins should be. So there's a lot of companies that actually can't do these things like hire the talent. So they're just not making any money. They didn't actually think about this product market fit, and they kind of just did like a cost plus model on when they charge. They didn't actually do like a value model on their product, and they're just making enough to kind of get by, and they can't go actually hire that CFO or that great leader. So and there aren't many books that talk about that. I mean, there are, but and I think what's that one guy, Profit First? It's not. It's like that was a pretty interesting book. I don't know if you've seen that one. Profit first. Make sure you bank your 10% before you pay all your bills. And yeah, but what's at the heart of that is actually, and there are a couple books about this, is like thinking about your business model. Again, a lot of books are not like this. Okay, 4 Steps to Epiphany, I think it's called. Different books that talk about how to come up with an MVP and what your business model actually is, so that you are creating value and then create your business, so you have a competitive advantage. Too many times it's like, okay, you got a business, all right, you got to run meetings this way, and this is how you should organize this, but wait a minute. How about like why you actually have a business? Like what's special about your product and your value? And there's not a lot of at least not a lot of popular books on that. And so I think those are like two areas where I think you can read all these books, but if you don't have those things handled, you could just continue struggling.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how many CEOs really understand their business model. So when I pick
Mm.
apart what you're saying, when I work with folks, like what, and so it's your product or service and the size of the potential market, great. Why, and that deals with customer experience and competition. And then how do you price? And cost plus has nothing to do with pricing, in my opinion. It's what the market will bear, which is, I think, what you're saying.
Mhm.
And then there's expenses, there's profit, and the exciting part, which is potential for future profit. Most CEOs haven't thought through that very well. And I think there's an opportunity educating every single leader in the organization on those simple aspects of the business model so they can make decisions, in their area of responsibility to continually improve it. So I guess I'm agreeing with you that it's not happening, and I'm not getting good answers from senior leaders in a lot of these small and mid-sized businesses.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of other things, and there's also a lot of different business categories. I'm familiar with a lot of services and a lot of physical product and some engineered product, but not really in the tech or the banking and healthcare. There's so many industries, right? They're all different, and they're all going to have a different kind of capital structure. But yeah, that's kind of what I've seen, and I think a lot of it is just too much hope. Well, let me actually, let me tell you another interesting thing. So some people that I've seen, uh, how they lead the team is they okay. So if your team is sort of junior, let's say it's a sales team, and this will kind of relate to the book conversation. If you have a junior sort of team, right? Maybe you have like a sales leader, but they're semi-junior, and you're the leader of the company, and you're just telling them, "Hey, this is our sales goal. Like, we need to hit it." And then it's like 2/3 of the month, guys, we need another 500,000. Okay, let's do whatever we can to get 500,000. And on and on. Like when I look at that, that doesn't do anything. Okay, of course they're going to get 500,000 if they knew how to get 500,000. The reason you're not there is because they don't know how to get there. And that's kind of how a lot of these books are. It's a lot of cheerleading, and look, I love Napoleon Hill, and so I'm a big believer that you got to have a positive mindset and everything, but you got to actually do as well. So it's sort of like you got to have that mindset, and then, but he said, but Napoleon Hill gets a bad rap, but he said you have to have a burning passion and go out and then execute, right? Like so he put that part in there. So it's too much of just the mindset and not the burning passion. And in the scenario I'm bringing up, the leader has to go show his team how to go find those 500. Maybe it's a skill they don't know. Maybe it's a phone call they don't know, or whatever. And otherwise it's just going to lead to frustration. And so I think that kind of relates to a lot of messages in these books.
Yeah. And as I'm thinking about what you're saying, we should have a process for having a predictable way of making an investment to get marketing qualified leads that convert to sales qualified and closing. And then we need to onboard and do all that. So you've got all that in place. And let's make an assumption that this mid-sized business example, they have their business model figured out. Now you have all these different people going through. And I think, and you just change one person out, it can change the dynamic of the entire team. And I think that getting that right and how you show up as a leader. I mean, leadership to me is creating value with and through others. And the whole purpose of leadership to me is, increasing productive engagement. Productive being defined as they're creating the value they were hired to create and continually improve on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can have all the right stuff in place, but if you don't show up as a leader, in the right way. You might get an amazing result. Somebody else trying to replicate what you're doing can have all the same things in place and still not get the result because of how they show up as a leader. What have you learned about how you show up as a leader to keep this productive engagement level high and
Yeah.
move in the direction? Or is that making sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, again, I had to learn all this, right? Because I, what I learned, and all these things took me way too long to learn. But what you learn is when you're the leader, every word you say matters. Okay, whether you think it does or it doesn't, whether you just think it's a little side word, or you're in a meeting, or you talk about somebody or something, everything matters. So you have to be very strategic how you communicate. If you know you have all the common rules, don't talk behind people, et cetera, et cetera. But it does force you to be, you do need to be positive and not show fear. And you also have to be confident and show people how to execute. And I did every job. So that I like leading by example. Okay, I'm in the warehouse, unloading a container. Um, you know, I've done everything in the office. So, I think it's not about like an ego thing, but it's more like you want the team to be able to trust you. If you say, hey, this is the direction we're going, or hey, we want, the warehouse organized this way, or this is a new partner we're going to go after. And and if you don't have kind of that built-in trust, then, I think that can create problems with an organization. But also the team then kind of gets their work ethic from the leader. Okay, this is why I like in person as much as possible, by the way. Okay, I know we're kind of in a remote world, but I mean, let's face it. Again, back to what we said at the beginning. It's a talent war, right? You're building a team. You're building the Lakers, and so if everybody's performing really good, your organization's gonna have a great shot at competing. And so I think that happens when they see kind of how the leader works and what the leader's expectations are. And it doesn't mean you have to be there 12 hours a day either. It just means you have to lead. And so those are, a couple of lessons I learned.
Well, you say it took you a long time, but I think you went faster than I did. I mean, if you look at today, from when I turned 18 as an adult, this is my 46-year overnight success story. And I'm still learning. I'm not even 10% of what I think is probably possible.
Well, look at it. You probably don't need to work, but that's probably the joy of it for you, right? So you get to keep learning and expanding kind of your knowledge set.
Yeah, I mean, you came from a really large entrepreneurial family. I came from what I would categorize as a hot mess. Family members in and out of prison, just some really bad
Mm.
stuff going on. When I started high school, my parents kicked me out of the house at the beginning of my senior year, and and when I graduated, I was already earning enough money to find my own apartment and do all that, so that was great. But when I graduated, my mom called me and she started the conversation with, "Just file for bankruptcy, you'll be fine." Like, "What did you do?" And they charged up 4 credit cards in my name, all
Oh.
in the mid 20% interest range. It was Ward, Spiegel, and Sears. So I started negative and was able to create multi-generational wealth in my short time here. But it was like a 20-year ramp up to figuring it out and doing a lot of hard work, and then it shot up on the material value creation side.
Mhm.
And I figured out, and that's kind of the theme of this podcast, that it's getting the right balance of material, positive emotional energy, and spiritual or connectedness, value being created, like connected with family, communities, whatever's important to each person. But getting that in balance for me is what really made the difference. And so if I'm going to grow, I have to stay in the game. So I'm CEO of 2 companies today. I'm invested in a number of companies. With my combining my 3 CEO groups, I probably have close to 30 CEOs that I'm coaching. And I limit my groups to 8 max. So every 2 months we do a deep dive on everyone, because I've heard you bring up the challenge that I found in another podcast, where you join a Vistage and you got 12 or 16 members, and once a month, one CEO gets to go. It could be over a year before you get your turn. It
Mhm.
doesn't, it really doesn't work. But, kind of, it's a long-winded way of getting around. I think we have to stay in the game. Like, this is the funnest. I get to do this,
Yeah, I know.
and I don't need to do it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So you had do you think did you have like a chip on your shoulder that you kind of had to prove yourself just coming out of that family situation? Do you think that might have helped you? Because I mean, in order to go 20 years and build what you built, you really have to endure a lot. Meaning, kind of what I said earlier, you have to really have a lot of gumption and push through a lot to get to that point.
Well, you worked incredibly hard for 15 years. Most give up. They don't wanna
Yeah.
put in the work. But no, it wasn't that, and I have thought deeply about that question that you just asked.
Hmm.
I There's something I call the value creation cycle, where you struggle to get a capability, it builds confidence, you use that to create value in some way, and then you get to take bigger steps each time. So
Hmm.
mine started at 6 years old for, an unsolicited, on my part, neighbor. I'm riding my bike down the street. "Hey, would you pull weeds in my backyard for 25 cents an hour?" Wasn't friend, wasn't family, and it was a real exchange of value, and I remember how it felt because in our family, money, we just didn't have it was a big, a really big emotional challenge, and then that went to all kinds of stuff, to shoveling snow and mowing lawns and paper routes, dishwasher, busboy, cook at a Coco's restaurant, like a Denny's, and that's what I was doing when I was kicked out of the house. It was a non-event for me to afford an apartment back then. This would have been 79.
Hmm.
And, so that value creation cycle, it's like, this is fun. It feels good. There's internal fulfillment and self-esteem. Does that resonate with you? It's like,
Yeah, no,
I
you're
love
on
that.
it.
Yeah.
You're on it 100%. Actually, what that I think that was the key thing you said. A lot of people underestimate it. I think it's why it's good for young people to work. My 18-year-old, just was working yesterday and he's making a few dollars and it gives you confidence, to get in there and learn and actually understand the value of money, but also confidence that you can do it yourself. And but yeah, I think kind of your earlier question was, why kind of I don't know if you said why keep doing it, but it's something like that, right? Like why, we're in the game. This is a privilege to be in the game. And we have the opportunity to help other people, right? And right now, I have a situation. I mean, it's helping turn a company around. I mean, that's amazing, for the employees, for the ownership, an asset that looks like it could have been just a bankrupt asset now has a shot. So yeah, it's super, super fun having that opportunity.
Yeah, and culturally, it's always been strange to me, and it gets stranger the more I hear it. The goal is make a bunch of money and relax.
Hmm.
And for me, like, we have to struggle, or put a lot of effort in if we wanna significantly grow, physically, emotionally, mentally. And so I need to stay in the game, so I keep growing. I couldn't imagine stopping and just going and sitting in the mountains and watching the deer come by, or whatever that is for, anybody. I think it's the wrong advice. The whole concept of retirement makes no sense. Stay in the game, whatever it takes, and struggle at the level that you're comfortable with, emotionally, physically, and mentally. That's how I think about it. We have to put an effort to grow. And I've talked to a lot of folks that when you bring up, hey, when it gets really hard or struggle, is that good or bad? It's like you have to struggle to grow. They're like, no, all struggle is bad. It's like that is the wrong
Hmm.
relationship with struggle. And
Hmm.
everything you learned, I would imagine, Luke. I don't know if it's like my experience. I come out the other side, man. That was really hard, but oh my gosh, I am so much more capable right now. My radar gets adjusted, all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
I feel great. Is it like that? Has it
Yeah.
been?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Like, you know, look at the confidence and, you're able to do whatever you want. I feel confident doing whatever I need to do. I never feel like a challenge. And again, I'm very humble, but I'm just saying I never look at something and say, well, I can't do that. Okay. And that's not being overconfident. It's just, if you've struggled through things, that most things in life are actually not that complicated, but they take time because you have to kind of learn whatever that, the winding road is to get there. But to your point earlier, Lee, by the way, when I sold my business, I did have this thing of like, gosh, what's next? And and why even like, what does another, paycheck of dollars even matter anymore? Right. Why do it? It's just like a question we're talking about now. Right. And I'll tell you what, I did not find a good book about this subject. Someone's got to write this book. Okay. You might know the person. Now maybe there's something out there that I didn't find. There's nothing that clearly answers that question for me. So I have been kind of looking around a bit and I'm a religious person, so I can find it within, the Christian religion. But and absolutely, you can find it there, but it's still different when you're trying to apply it to life. Okay, so this is a whole different philosophical thing. Now, I'm not a philosopher, but I'll tell you what, I found I am kind of now. I think I'm finding my way into it, and that is through like existentialism and even like Viktor Frankl, Answers for Meaning, logotherapy. So there's a little bit in those lines of thought that can tell you that, hey, you need to show up and you're meant for something and you have to go find your meaning. Okay, that's so that I think that kind of goes into this question a little bit of why just kick up your shoes, because you're meant for something in life, and we have to go find that meaning and pursue it.
Yeah, I mean, it's healthy for companies to grow. You're either growing, you're kind of shrinking,
Mm-hmm.
and it's unhealthy to go backwards for all the stakeholders. And I think it's the same for ourselves. And I read low end 50, high end 80 to 100 books a year, and one of those books is always Man's Search for Meaning every year. And I get a deeper understanding. I get better questions, going through all of that. So 100%. My first book a few years ago was Your Most Important Number, and it outlines my management system for helping grow the value of businesses. I just finished another one that comes out at the end of this month titled Value Creation Family, and it's about helping families intentionally create holistic value. Super
Mm-hmm.
excited for that. It'll be out at the end of this month. I just narrated in my home recording studio here
That's amazing.
about a week ago, the audiobook. And then probably May, June, I'll have another book, Leading for Value, coming out, which will touch on what you're talking about amongst a number of other things. So I want to share all this. And most of my guests actually have a book. So I did want to encourage you to please think about writing a book, because you have
Yeah.
your practical wisdom is so good. Again, from your podcast, I think I mentioned I listened to the last 3 that you went through. You've got 150 episodes in there. I'm going to listen to more. So it's the 8-Figure Product CEO podcast.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the biggest learnings from doing this podcast in 150 episodes so far for you?
Thank you. Yeah, no. Well, when I started it, I did a lot of. I changed the name a little bit, or I did change the name because it used to be more focused on operations in my industry. Okay, so like the very early episodes, and then kind of as I've been doing this consulting and stuff like that, kind of changed it and focused on operators of product businesses. And not every time it's a product operator, but try to get into that that you know. I wanted to make it niche so that there is an audience for it, because there are obviously a lot of business podcasts out there. So yeah, what I've learned is what I really like is understanding the product ideation, the value creation. That if I can, if I get the right entrepreneur on there who had to start it from scratch, those are really fun. And at the same time, sometimes you get people who can't get past their idea. Okay, I mean, I'm not there to tell them, but sometimes, I might have a guess that I'm not sure they're going to make it, unless they do a pivot around there. So, because I think so much rides on that idea, not falling too in love with it, listening to the consumer or whoever you're selling to, listening to your customer and being able to pivot on it. But yeah, that has been the most fun part, I think.
Yeah, and it's getting easier for me to see why certain companies are stuck when you talk to the CEO,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Yeah.
part, I think, what you're saying. They're just
Yeah.
hard over on this is it. They're not open to being, present and curious with their customers and ideation to keep creating more and more value.
Listen, it's when you have how many years that we have in it, it's a blessing and a curse. Okay, we can look at a company like, for example, recent one I'm helping, couple $1 million small company, losing 20% a year. Okay, no change. It's like smart people running the business. Why did they not change? 'Cause people don't like to be uncomfortable. Okay, they don't want to go into the unknown. Even in the CEO's mind, there would be no company left if we make a change. There'd be no company left if we don't make a change. you know,
Well,
so
how big is the nest egg to keep losing 20%? How many years can you do that?
exactly. Well, I got in there before that ran out, but yeah, exactly. Maybe another year or two and it's over. Um, so I think a lot of it is, yeah, it is easy to say. It is hard. Actually, it's not hard to do because it could all be done in a month or two, but it is hard on the soul, hard on the mind and the heart to do some of these things, but they have to be done. Otherwise there's no business. And I think so that's why, for us, it's easy. Yeah. You look in there, you're like, okay, let's look at the numbers. Okay, how's the money being made? How's this set up and organized? And it's usually pretty easy to spot some of these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the two biggest things for me are business model and talent.
Hmm.
And a lot of CEOs, they're just not, we've touched on already, but they're just not good at both of those things. So if we can develop them to move in that direction, to have a better handle on it, and even how they ask questions when they interview, that can make a world of difference for them in terms of their results and making things happen.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually helping another CEO in the hiring process, and I encouraged him to go get a recruiter. It's like, so he's got the A+ recruiter. I mean, why not pay the extra for somebody who's potentially going to be like a president of a company, right? And run your company. You can't just go wing it and do it on your own. So bring in the other talent. Because I totally agree with you. Too many CEOs, we can be too emotional. We need, it's great to have somebody with a better decision making criteria when it comes to, hiring and bringing on that talent.
Yeah. And recruiters can be expensive,
Yes.
but it can be way more expensive not doing it. And even going through a recruiter that has a great track record, my expectations are I may have to do this 2 or 3 times to get it right.
Hmm.
People interview really well, they don't always show up that way. So my questions get better, looking for capability, what they've done before, all of that. So I'm probably batting 75%, but you still get it wrong. So when that happens, I don't act like a victim. It's like, this is just part of the game. These are all people and all of that. How do you think about that?
I forget the name of the book, but there actually is. Now that we're talking about books, there was a good recruiting book. You might have read this one. I forget the name of it, but anyways, the principle was the following. It was that when you're hiring and by the way, when I say recruiters, I'm talking about like an executive recruiter. So they are more expensive. They're not just taking 20% and finding you somebody. They're literally doing all the background work, and so they're getting the executive talent. But anyways, this the most recruiters are, and for good reason, but they know how to interview, and they go through the history, and they're looking to make sure that this individual's been moving up and what they've accomplished, and looking for any issues in their history, and all of that can all be done. But what I thought was interesting was this book talked about how important references are. Okay, and it said that what you do is you go through, and let's say they've worked for 4 other companies. Let's say 4, and they've worked for 4 leaders at those companies. You get them to have those leaders call you. Essentially, this is what the book said. Okay, you get them to have the leaders call you. So I'm not going out and calling the references. That leader is going to call me, and they're not choosing the references. I'm choosing the reference because I'm saying, oh, okay, you work for John and Amy and so and so, and you report it up to them. And then what you do is during the interview, you're saying, okay, how would they describe you? What would they say about you? And they got to be sort of honest. And then you're having that person call you. And I'll tell you what, this is like, I'm sure there's more things you have to do in the recruiting, but this is like one of the top 3 for me, because you get done with these executive or even, staff level managers or whatever the case is, and you interview 3 of them. Let's say you're in the final 3, and you each of them, in their history, you asked for these 4 people to call you back, and it always works that one of them, all 4 call you back within like 3 days, and they're giving you glowing responses. And I'm telling you, that's valuable, right? Because I want to know when I hire somebody, I want to hire somebody that's going to do something for me or do something for the company that we're not doing, but yet that they did previously at another company, right? We're upgrading. We're bringing that new skill into the company, and this is one of the best ways that I found to ensure that.
Yeah. And even interviewing the recruiting company, right? Asking them questions, because a lot of them just give you a warm body and hope you say yes. This
Oh yeah,
person's,
yeah,
but they didn't go through it. I've seen and experienced some of that as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you gotta have a reference on that. You actually have to interview the recruiting companies. Once you find a good one, you stay with them because they go above and beyond.
And for the executive positions, which are the most important in terms of, it's what they cost, the impact they can have on the business.
Hmm.
I love asking an opening question, given what you know about our business, let's say we want you to take over marketing, head of revenue or something. Where would you start? What would you do? And if they haven't thought about it at all, it's just, hey, this is a great cup of coffee. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You want to prepared. I've had interviews, some of them so and that's the thing is like, I'm, maybe the visionary, not the I am very detailed, but not I don't have the patience to set up the detailed infrastructure, right? That's a different type of a personality. And I'll tell you what, when you interview someone like that, you're like, okay, I want that person, but you have to ask questions like you're suggesting here. And sometimes they'll respond and they'll tell you, that they've like done all this work on LinkedIn and they know who your team is already and they know how many people have left and quit in the last 3 years. And, those are the really good ones.
Oh yeah, they need to have thought about it if they're going to be a star. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see any other way around that. But a lot of times CEOs will interview giving them all the answers and um, wanting them to win. It's like they fell in love with a candidate. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
what they say, you're going to bring them in, but they're so amazing. It's like, no, I didn't really see that coming in. So got to be careful there. One last point, I've heard you talk a lot about this in different podcasts, but just positioning your business to sell
Mm-hmm.
at any and every point in time, because you don't know what could change. Even if you never want to sell it, life conditions can change, right? So what's your advice there on making sure that you're ready to sell for the most when the time comes?
This is so important because what people the first thing is people who've never sold, they don't realize it does take a long time to sell. And this can actually put people, it could literally take a year. And we're talking about companies that are doing a couple million in profit and more, right? It could be different for smaller business, small businesses, right? So the first thing is like understand where you are in the ecosystem. So are you going to maybe get bought by a private equity, by a strategic? How many million in profit is your company? If you're over 5 million, I mean, you're open for the entire market. That's the thing I would say. And nowadays, actually, private equity's gone down to even like the 2 and 3, maybe like 3 for what's called a platform, meaning they would literally buy your business and then potentially if you stay with it, you go out and buy more, and that's called the platform. And so, if you're like in the 5 million range, you have all these options. If you're smaller, you still have a lot of options, and if you're under 1 million, then you have a little different set of options. So, kind of understand where you are and know that what does private equity want. Now, a lot of people will put private equity wants the world. Okay, they're going to want everything. I mean, and by the way, private equity has the money now, so they're the ones doing the deals. That's why I'm bringing them up, right? But of course, you could get bought by a strategic or family office, whatever the case is. But the thing is, they want the world, and what I've heard, okay, is what I consider not great advice. Is what I've heard is there are like 10 things they want. They want all these I's dotted and T's crossed, and the way it's sort of presented when people hear these things, they'll go to a 1 day conference and like, oh, you got to do all these things. And the thing is, they're not what nobody ever tells you that these are not all equal. Okay. It's like, what do they want? They want a company making a lot of money who's making more than average margins in your category. That's like 90%. Then 10% is everything else, But when you go to the 1 day seminar, it's like, oh, okay, how's your structure set up? And how's your, accounting services and how's your, banking and all this kind of stuff. And it is important, but let's be real here. They're going to look at if you're doing a business, if you're making a widget, they want you to probably be in the top 75% of all of those widget makers as far as profitability goes. Okay. So if the margins are 8% and you're 12% and you're 5 million and let's say that 12% EBITDA puts you in the top 75%, I would just focus on that. I mean, take it to 13% maybe, because what they're going to look at is they're going to look at your business and they're going to be, okay, these guys they're more profitable. That means they're doing something better. Oh, they have a better brand and they have a better, product, and they have maybe they have IP or competitive advantage. So that's where I put all the focus on. And what the seminars do is they're like, okay, do you have this IP and do you have this? And oh, this is another good one when you sell, and you're going to need to negotiate this when you sell. And all of those things are important. But what I'm saying is they're all derivatives of having that high margin. So that's really where it goes back to is the product ideation. But then after that, have good financials is the next thing. So have solid financials that are trustworthy. If you can get audited financials, get them. I mean, if you're just at like reviewed financials, that's fine. But think about where you are on the financial side probably is the number two.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Yeah, and again, things can just change, and margins, they're if the PE's buying it, they're buying it to get a return,
Hmm.
and a lot of them want like directionally a 3x return in 3 to 5 years. That's what they're shooting for. So how positioned are you for that? But then there's a number of other elements. I've heard you talk about the strength of the leadership team, the controls, the product, the size of the market, all of it that goes into it. And I guess I would add one little thing: make keeping your company the better option because things are running so well.
Exactly. Keeping it that's the other thing. If you're doing really good profit, then you don't have to sell, like, you have leverage, right? You don't want to be in a place where you're sort of you know, you're forced to walk away. So you want leverage, and most of these, like, there's a lot of horror stories, but most of these people, they're good people. Like, they don't want to have a bad reputation either, by the way. So there are stories of, earnouts and all that, and I think that they've kind of learned from those mistakes. And a lot of times they don't even want to do earnouts. Actually, they don't want to do that because there may be a roll up, like where you're rolling over some and investing alongside of them, but the PEs, they just want to de-risk is what I found. Okay, they're most of them are bankers, and we joke around and call spreadsheet jockeys. Okay, and so they want to de-risk. So the other elements you brought up, have a great leadership team, make sure your brand stands above the other brands. We talked about the financials, systems, operations. Your place is clean, right? They're going to come in like, how does your business look? These are just obvious things, front doors, the glass is clean when they do their visit. I mean, these are just like, really have some pride about your business. And then when they come in, they're like, okay, because they really are risk averse as well, and they've been, had been burned and so on. So that's what I've learned is they want, when they do due diligence, what they're doing is they're actually eliminating risk. Okay. What lawsuits have happened, what potential risk is out there. And that's literally what they're just searching everywhere for. So you want to clean all that up before they come in.
And then this concept of strategic patience. I know a lot of CEOs are in a big hurry, but when it comes to selling, for whatever it's worth, the biggest deal where I sold into 9 figures, I walked away 3 times before we came to an agreement, and we landed more than double where they started.
Wow. Well, you knew your value. Not everybody.
I fine keeping it. I wasn't on the market. They approached
Mhm.
us,
Mhm.
and being the strategic that they are, the potential is leveraging it to tenfold it within 5 or 6 years.
Mm.
So I knew the value was there. In fact, I think it would have been worth it paying even twice again. But it ended up being a 21.6x multiple of EBITDA. Not bad for an aviation aftermarket business.
Oh, wow,
That's
that is
that's
amazing.
almost 3x what most would get,
Yeah.
but it was so worth it to what they were doing and the foundation for growth. Hey, look, for our listeners, where can they go to learn more about the work that you're doing and connect with you?
Yeah, real simple. Just head over to apexceo.co. That's the easiest place. Find me on LinkedIn at Luke Peters.
Okay. This has been fantastic. Any final words for our listeners?
No, it's been a pleasure, Lee. We have a lot in common, so look forward to maybe catching up with you after this.
Yeah, we really do. Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today's episode, please like and subscribe. And until next time, show your value to the world.